My name is Pat Burns. I'm the Vice President for IT and Dean of the Libraries, and we're here to present to you on Flipped Classrooms. I'm here with my compatriot, Gwen Grzelski, who's the Director of TILT. Rusty Scott, raise your hand in the back, who's the Chair of the Classroom Review Board. Steve Holton, who's the Director of Facilities. We'll be tag teaming today. If you have questions, just sing out, and then we'll have some dialogue at the end too if we have time. And so we appreciate being here today. It's always great to talk and interact with students. This is something that's really fundamental, I think, to all of our future together. So back 2 years ago, Provost Miranda had gone to an APLU, the American Public Land Grant University meeting, and went to a presentation on flipped classrooms for STEM classes, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And he learned it can dramatically improve learning and performance, that is grades, in STEM classes, and we've been looking for the secret sauce for that for actually decades, I think. And so there's some new pedagogy involving flipped classrooms that really improve student learning and student success, and that's what we're all about. And that's what we're here to talk to you about today. And we have an expert on the pedagogy here with us, Gwen, so over to you. Yeah, to the right.
So I want to start by saying that Professor Stephanie Clemens had hoped to be here today, and she asked me to convey to you her apologies that she's not able to do that. She is the chair of the Committee on Teaching and Learning, which is a standing committee of Faculty Council. As its name implies, it represents the faculty concerns and perspectives related to teaching and learning, and it's a forum for faculty to work on addressing those concerns and initiatives related to them. Stephanie had really hoped to be here this evening, but she has a commitment to review another program in her field at a different institution, so she is out of the state right now. However, she and I both want to convey that COTL, the Committee on Teaching and Learning, is very much in support of the Flipped Classrooms initiative, as you probably know from Sam Laffey. That committee, COTL, endorsed your resolution in support of the flipped classrooms, and that's something that we very much want to convey to you, a sense that we hope that this is an initiative that is taken congruently by both students and faculty. We see this as an initiative that meets both faculty concerns about how to improve teaching, and that speaks to what we think are student concerns and investments as well. Pat talked for a minute about flipped classrooms, and I'll define those more specifically shortly. But what I want to say right now is that the flipped classroom is a teaching approach that implements many teaching methods that have been long shown by research to improve the quantity of material learned and retained, and the quality of learning, the depth of learning, and capacity for people to apply what they have learned in new contexts. So that's, in short, the reason for the initiative, and that's an overview of what flipped classrooms do. So I think that's probably the thing to say about that. The definition of flipped classrooms more precisely, and the reason for the name, is that they invert the relationship between the traditional classroom, between out-of-class work and in-class work, as that's typically configured in a traditional lecture course. So in flipped classrooms, typically material that would be presented in lecture is reformatted into short video clips, 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes maximum, but generally shorter clips that work together in an organized sequence. However, those video clips are typically interspersed with other activities, and those activities might be short quizzes or predictions based on what the student has learned from the video clip. They're designed to increase interaction, increase depth of understanding, and to provoke questions that may help the person working through this material to engage more deeply with the next steps of material and understand it better. In addition, the video clips are typically interspersed with learning objects. And learning objects are often digital, but they are also sometimes used in classrooms. In this case, digital might range from a 3D map of geological features of a particular area. That might be a model of an atom. It might be an interactive game. That we have a history professor at CSU who's doing really exciting and interesting work, helping students engage with the experiences of various groups impacted by major historical events like World War I. So that a game like that would also be a learning object. So the idea in Flipped Classrooms, just to kind of bring all of that together, is that the short video clips are interspersed with these kinds of learning objects so that there's much more engagement with the material outside of class, and so that students have typically gained a first level of understanding of that material by the time you go to class. So rather than receiving that material in lecture, you've already done that work outside of class, and what that means is class time is now available for modes of learning that have been shown by research to be more effective. Those kinds of learning modes include collaborative work, peer-to-peer teaching of different aspects of the material being learned. There's a lot of research that shows that one of the most effective ways to master material is actually to teach it to others. Project-based learning, problem solving, all of which can take place in the classroom in a way that is facilitated by the instructor. So in worst case scenarios, traditional classrooms led to a situation for some students in which students watched a math demonstration on the board and left class saying, yes, I can do this, and then get home and open the book and, boy, this isn't going the way that I thought that it was going, and I can't figure out why it's not working, which is, I think, one of the weaknesses of the traditional model. The flipped model addresses that problem by having you engage with that material initially outside of class, come to class, and then if you get stuck, you have peers, you have structured activity to help you work through that, and you have the instructor who can also address problems, concerns, questions. So it's a means of working more deeply with the material you're learning in a structured environment that is better designed to promote success. So I think the best way to summarize is to say that Flipped Classrooms put students rather than instructors at the center of learning and at the center of activity in the classroom. One sort of tagline that's used often in professional development for faculty is that we want to shift from the model of the sage on the stage to the guide on the side. We want faculty to be supporting your active engagement with the material rather than holding forth brilliantly. Not that faculty aren't brilliant, they are, and they have a lot to offer, but that's a method that's more effective in supporting your learning. So as this slide indicates, material learned in lecture tends not to be retained well. Estimates are that it's at about 5%. In contrast, some estimates are that about 80% of material learned from student-to-student interactions and teaching, where peers are teaching each other, is at about 80%. So we are, with the Flipped Classroom approach, trying to get to that 80% retention rate and understanding rate. Because the Flipped Classroom approach is relatively new, there's not a lot of research on that approach specifically. However, there is research on on the components of that approach. So first I'll talk about one example of some research that does exist on Flipped Classrooms. Purdue University has been developing Flipped Classrooms and closely related approaches since 2008, and they have been collecting data on the changes that result from this approach. So their data includes 120 courses, but multiple sections of those courses over many years and semesters. And their data set includes about 14,000 students. So that's a very respectable number, and that means that their conclusions have a little bit more weight. So here are some of their findings. 65% of their redesigned courses had increased student retention over 1 year, and these differences were statistically significant in 34.6% of the courses. 65% of the courses had lower DFW rates than their 4-year averages, and 53% of those decreases were statistically significant. How many people know what DFW rates are?
Drop, fail.
No, not in this case.
Grades.
They're grades, yeah. DFW are grades, and they're used at the university as a marker of when there might be concerns. So a high DFW rate means that a high percentage of students they may be passing the course technically if they have a D, but usually they're not passing at a level that's going to allow them to progress to any course that requires that course as a prereq. So a high DFW rate means that a lot of students are leaving that course unsuccessfully and will probably need to take it again if they need it as a prereq for another course. So that's important in terms of the Purdue study, because what it shows is that flipped classrooms reduce that number of DFW rates, means they reduce the number of unsuccessful students. 46% of Purdue's redesigned courses had their highest retention and graduation rates of the last 4 years compared to the versions of the courses before they were redesigned. 65% of the redesigned courses had higher GPAs than their 4-year averages, and in 75% of those cases, the GPA was the highest for that course in 4 years. So as I mentioned earlier, it's not surprising that the flipped classroom achieves these results, because even though there's not a lot of research on flipped classrooms so far, there is a lot of research on the components of the teaching approaches that go into flipped classrooms. I have already talked a long time, so I won't give you a whole lot of detail about that. What I will say is just that practices that are included are moving students beyond a more superficial engagement with learned material, so that would be, say, skimming the text quickly or even highlighting, to critical analysis of the material, consideration of where it's relevant, how it relates to other key concepts in a course, peer-to-peer interactions having to do with understanding of the material, demonstrating, again, what the implications of a concept or procedure are or when they should be used, problem solving, and multiple opportunities to use new conceptual knowledge or new procedural knowledge. So as a result of that, what we're seeing informally is that classroom misbehaviors tend to diminish as people become more engaged in the kinds of active learning activities that I described. There are also corollary benefits because flipped classrooms increase conditions that prior research has shown improve student success rates. So those conditions include things like extent of interaction with faculty or extent of interaction with peers related to course material. There are also many national publications on higher education that are featuring stories on institutions implementing the flipped classroom approach and finding success in terms of student learning outcomes. So these kinds of publications would include the Chronicle of Higher Education mentioned here, but also Change and Inside Higher Education. So that's why we are pursuing the flipped classroom approach here at CSU. We are, as you may know, remodeling BSB 105, that's 105 in the Behavioral Sciences building, as a flipped classroom, and we are working with a group of instructors who volunteered, and I might add they eagerly volunteered, to teach flipped classes in that classroom this coming semester. So you'll hear a little bit more about the classroom in more depth shortly. But the overview is that BSB will serve as a sandbox for the faculty who are teaching flipped classes there next semester, and their classes range across disciplines. The flipped classroom approach can be implemented in traditional classrooms. However, we think that classrooms that are designed in terms of their physical layout, their furnishings, and their technology to support the flipped approach are likely to be more successful in deepening student learning. One of the other things that we'll do as part of this project is conduct research on the flipped classes that will be taught as the pilot, as part of the pilot this coming spring. And in preparation for our visit to talk with you tonight, Lance asked us to describe any data that were collected on Anton Betten's pilot version of a flipped Math 161 Anton is teaching that pilot version this fall. So I'm going to give you a quick summary of where we are in the data collection on that course, and also where we're headed in terms of data collection across the pilot sections that will be taught in the spring. For Anton's course, we don't have any data available yet. A pre-course survey was administered to the students taking Anton's course at the beginning of the semester, and a post-course survey will be administered within the next couple of weeks. What we are doing is looking at changes in a couple of variables that, again, prior research has shown to be associated with deeper and more extensive student learning. One of those is self-efficacy, so a student's sense of ability to learn and master this particular type of material and to learn and master new material more generally. Engagement, level of engagement with the course, and total time spent on a course. All of those variables have been shown to correlate with deeper learning, so those are variables that we will measure to see if the flipped classroom is having an impact on those. We will also look for whether there are correlations between changes in those variables and students' grades. We're also, that's really focused to a great degree on the pedagogy, but we do have survey questions and some other forms of data collection that will give us a sense of whether the physical layout of the classroom is impacting students' learning as well. Although naturally we will not know for sure until we have the data, we expect the data to show that that not only the pedagogical approach, but the layout of the classroom, the furnishing, the technology will also impact student learning. I should mention briefly that in addition to the quantitative data from the survey, some other forms of data that we'll gather include qualitative data, focus groups, and interviews with students as well as with faculty. And we are interested in both types because we think the qualitative data will help us understand what the numbers from our quantitative data actually mean in terms of students' learning experiences, perceptions of what's happening in the course, and just how people are responding both to the pedagogy and to the layout of the classroom. So that's where we are now. Oops. I think I'm missing a slide. However, I will explain what it said. That's where we are now. We need some important next steps. The most immediate problem facing us is that, so we've got this great renovation of BSB 105 underway, but we don't have any classrooms, any flipped classroom spaces big enough for large lecture courses. The slide that I think I am missing would show you that unfortunately there are higher D, F, and W rates, meaning lower student success, in some of the key gateway courses. The courses represented on that slide are from the STEM fields, and that's notable because those courses typically enroll large numbers of students. So what that means is these are courses that we really want to flip because they have high DFW rates, and to improve student success in these courses and potentially help people prepare for their desired majors, we need to be able to flip these large lecture courses, but we don't have spaces big enough to do that. So that's one of the pressing issues in front of us now. So we're working on that issue by seeking funds to renovate a larger course, a larger classroom, and you'll hear more about that shortly. And as I said, we are looking at STEM disciplines, but we're looking at other disciplines as well. So this is not STEM-centric, it includes other fields too. And it's also worth noting that we have 7 faculty teaching in the pilot this spring semester, but we had many more faculty from across disciplines who are very eager to participate, but we just didn't have space for them to do so this time around. So we're looking for opportunities to expand the number of classrooms and the number of opportunities for faculty to participate because we think that's going to increase student success. And we're looking for support from CSU to do that. Because we feel strongly that support from your group will be very well received and highly respected by CSU administration and will be a key factor in decision making about whether to allocate resources to this project. So that's why we're here tonight. In addition, we are preparing faculty to implement the flipped approach in a number of ways. Most specifically, we're doing that through trainings at TILT. Most of you probably know TILT is the Institute for Learning and Teaching. And TILT has developed a training program to prepare faculty to teach in BSB 105 for next term, but this training program is applicable for faculty more broadly, and it's being designed with the intent that it will be used by additional faculty in the future. The training workshops emphasize the flipped approach. They model the flipped approach for faculty. So faculty are not only getting information, instructions, and background on how the flipped approach works, and a lecture about how to implement it. They themselves will experience the flipped approach through the workshops. So we have a Canvas site developed already. That site has extensive materials on it related to the research, the how-to, and also how to design the kinds of learning objects that I mentioned earlier, how to create the video clips, because of course this is a really substantial project for faculty members to redesign a course in this way. So faculty members who participate in the workshops, and all of the 7 faculty teaching in BSB 105 next semester have agreed and are excited to participate in these workshops. They will access some of the online materials prior to their workshop sessions, and then when they come to the workshop sessions, those will be far more interactive, implementing the same kinds of active learning strategies that they will need to use with the students who enroll in their sections. So they will get the chance not just to hear about those, but to actually experience those for themselves, and see why they work and how they work. They also, the other thing to note about the workshops is that they provide faculty with a forum for exchanging their drafts, not only with course designers at TILT who are well positioned to give them feedback, but also with colleagues. And that I think is crucial, because that's one important way that faculty develop more effective teaching methods. So the workshops will give them a structure to do that. They'll take part in those in December, and then you may know that CSU does a PDI, Professional Development Institute, in January. And so the faculty who complete the workshops in December will work on their courses over break, and then they will present their courses to their colleagues at the PDI session designated for that purpose. So they'll have a chance to get a little bit more feedback and fine-tuning there. And then this last slide essentially is just indicating TILT's contribution to the training process. So thank you very much. If you have questions for me, I'm glad to take them now or glad to take them later, I think.
All right.